Welcome to Genesis Unleashed, the show that unleashes the truth of Genesis.
And poses the question to evolutionists, how did life originate? Welcome to Genesis Unleashed. On this program, we're going to talk about question 1 in the Question Evolution Flyer, one of our newest flyers. And question number 1. So we'll just deal with that, and we've had a number of supposed answers from evolutionists. We'll deal with those as well. Question number 1 is, how did life originate? I'll just read the question right out of the flyer. Evolutionist Professor Paul Davies admitted, nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organized themselves into the first living cell. End quote. Andrew Knoll, professor of biology at Harvard, said, we don't really know how life originated on this planet. End quote. A minimal cell needs several hundred proteins. Even if every atom in the universe were an experiment with all the correct amino acids present for every possible molecular vibration in the supposed evolutionary age of the universe, not even one average-sized functional protein would form. So how did life with hundreds of proteins originate just by chemistry without intelligent design? That's the question.
Right. Now, evolutionists have proposed some ideas, and we're going to deal with those, right? We've got an article on our website, creation.com/loopholes, and we're going to be discussing some of those supposed loopholes, ways that they can explain things around.
Well, that article, loopholes, or creation.com/loopholes, actually goes into more details about this question. It's it's a web link in the flyer right there.
Because we can only give a summary.
We can elaborate a little bit more about the chance of those things coming together, though, can't we?
That's right. So in the question itself, it had a very specific question talking about, how could you possibly get a protein to form by chance, and it gave an equation, etc. So I'm going to explain that a little more. Now, proteins, of course, they're the large molecules consisting of amino acids, right, which are in our bodies and cells, etc. And we need these things. Even the smallest living organism needs proteins to exist and function. So now, of course, there's 20 amino acids, right? And you take those amino acids and you link them kind of like a chain, and you fold them. Well, we don't do it, but and it becomes a protein. Now, in the question here, of course, it's very brief. You have to go to the article to get all this detail.
Right, to get the details. It's necessarily brief. I mean, it's only a little flyer, and we've packed 15 questions into this thing. So you need to go to some of these articles.
Some of the articles. But in it, we wanted to be generous to the evolutionists. So, because many evolutionists will think, well, listen, time's the hero, right? If you just give stuff enough time, these amino acids are going to link together, they're going to form proteins, life will come up, because time itself is kind of like the superhero that comes along and does it. But is it really? Scientists have estimated there's 10 to the 80th power atoms in the universe. So that's 10 with 80 zeros on the end of it.
Okay.
So there's 10 to the 80 atoms in the known universe, and there's 10 to the 12 atomic interactions per second. So in this equation here, we're actually figuring out how many basically experiments could happen over the so-called existence of the universe according to evolutionists.
Right. If every atomic reaction was an experiment.
Right.
But
so we're being very generous.
Right? Yeah.
So we've got 10 to the 18th seconds in the universe, according to the Big Bang Theory. You've got 14 or 15 billion years of history, which equals 10 to the 110 possible interactions that could have happened over the course of the so-called history of the universe.
That sounds like a lot.
That's a big number. 10 to the 110th zeros, right? We put 110 zeros on the end. So that's a huge number. But when you consider the average protein and how many amino acids need to be linked in the correct order, okay? Now you've got 20 amino acids. You've got 387 proteins for the simplest life possible. So they've tried to do experiments and figure out, well, just how simple could life be? And,
Right.
And evolutionists have done this, et cetera.
And they're always imagining that life could be simpler in the past, but that's
Right.
imagination isn't real good science. I mean,
Well, yeah, and they're dealing in the present with, okay, what machinery has to be there in order for this
Right.
thing to at least live,
Right.
And so
Yeah.
using their data, we're being generous to them, 387 proteins for the simplest possible life. That's their figure, not ours.
okay.
And so
Fair enough.
now there's 10 conserved amino acids on average. Now, if you do the math, and if you go to the article and you can see the equation there, that's 20 to the 3,870, or if you convert it, 10 to the 5,035 power. 10 with 5,035 zeros
yeah.
on the end. Well, that's
You've only got 10 to the, what was it, 18?
10 to the 110
10 to the 110.
possible interactions. You don't even have enough time in the Big Bang model, in the evolutionist model, to come up with a life form.
Even under these exceedingly favorable situations where there's
That's
so
right.
many reactions happening, all attempting to make the correct amino acid. But
That's
then,
right.
The correct protein. But then all you've got is a protein.
Right. Well, but you've got the proteins for life, right? So here's the way you got to think about it. When you're using your bank card, you need a PIN number.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And most people have like 4 digits, something like that. And most people think, well, that's sufficient security. What's the chance I'm going to get your bank card, go
Highly
there,
unlikely.
and I'm going to
Yeah.
figure it out which one it is, right? And
Yeah.
because and there's a certain, but in this equation, it would be similar to someone having a 5,000 digit PIN. So I just get somebody's card and I just randomly sit there and I got to do 5,000 before I can even try. And
Yeah.
what's the chance that that's going to happen? I mean, and so even if you want to say, well, time's the hero of the plot, you don't have enough time, even in their model, to do it. So these are some of the huge hurdles that we've seen.
Yeah, so those are kind of the details of question 1. I mean, it's summarized very briefly there. But when you get into the details, this is a serious problem for evolution. It's not. You can't just blow this off and
hand wave and say, oh, it must have happened, et
right.
cetera, et
And
cetera.
that's only one of the 15.
Yeah, this is such a problem that some evolutionists, of course, have responded with, well, multiverse theory. Basically, the idea is that now we've only got evidence for one universe. That's why it's called a universe, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
some people have proposed a multiverse because things are so
Improbable.
improbable that they're thinking, well, there must be just billions of these multiverses all over, and we're just the lucky ones. Right? Because things look so designed, they look so primed for life occurring in this universe, but they want to explain away a creator. So things look so good. Here's a quote I got from Mr. Folger, and this is from Discover magazine. And he said, short of invoking a benevolent creator, many physicists see only one possible explanation. Our universe may be one of perhaps infinitely many universes in an inconceivably vast multiverse. Most of these universes are barren, but some, like ours, have conditions suitable for life. Now, think about what he's saying, okay? You're invoking other universes, which you have no evidence for, to explain why our universe appears designed, so that you can bolster the belief that the universe wasn't designed. That seems like a bit of a leap, doesn't it?
It's some mental gymnastics going on there for sure.
Right.
So all to get away from the obvious notion that there's design in the universe and that there's
there is a
creator.
God and He created life in the first place. It didn't happen by chance.
Sure.
So, of course, when you go through, when you're looking at the article there, the loopholes article, we have many supposed loopholes that evolutionists have tried to go through. So we're not going to cover all of them. We're just going to do some of them. For example, but they're all serious challenges.
Yeah.
The idea that life could just originate by chance. So there's almost universal agreement among specialists that Earth's primordial atmosphere contained no methane, ammonia, or hydrogen, which are reducing gases. But most evolutionists now believe it contained carbon dioxide and nitrogen. The Stanley Miller experiment, most students would be familiar. Even today, they'll see that experiment in there with this fella. Took some took some stuff and zapped it, and he produced amino acids. That's a very simplistic way of explaining the Stanley Miller experiment. But anyway, he got these amino acids, and they thought, well, this is it. Like, in the Earth's primordial atmosphere, just random electricity or something
imagine
could have
some lightning and things happening, and presto, you have life.
Right, it's kind of a Frankenstein thing, right? Just zap it with energy, and boom, it comes to life, and it's all good. But these Miller-type sparking experiments don't work with those gases in the absence of reducing gases. So there's a huge challenge right there. The atmosphere contained free oxygen, which would destroy organic compounds. But if there was no oxygen, you've got no ozone, right? Here's another challenge. Right. So ultraviolet light would destroy biochemicals. However, oxygen is required in the chemical process that leads to adenine, one of the amino acids. So you
need oxygen, and you don't need oxygen. You can't have oxygen, and you have to have oxygen, and that kind of thing. So there's another problem there.
So people can propose these things, but when you actually analyze them, there's some problems.
Right. All the energy sources that are used to produce the biochemicals will destroy them even faster. Energy doesn't help the situation.
Right.
You have to have directed, very focused energy,
right,
usually programmed in a certain way to do a specific work.
It's kind of like a fridge. If you just had random undirected energy, it's not going to cool your fridge. But if you direct the energy, then you're going to preserve your food.
That's right. Yeah, the Miller-Urey experiment that Stanley Miller and Harold Urey in 1952-53 in Chicago, they used strategically designed traps in their sparking experiments to trap these biochemicals so that they wouldn't be destroyed.
Right, because amino acids would have fallen apart if they hadn't been preserved, so to speak, in these traps.
Yeah, the sparks and the UV and so on would destroy those things. Mm-hmm. And the biochemicals created, if anything would form in the ancient Earth, if we move forward in the process here, if you can get some biochemicals, they'd react with other chemicals and inorganic chemicals and break each other down.
Right.
For example, sugar reacts with amino acids. Once there's a system in place to keep those two things from reacting with each other, then you can have life. It's no problem. That's what we have today. But how do you get that system where you need sugars and you need amino acids, but if they react with each other, they destroy each other?
Right.
Another problem.
Right. Also, there's no geological evidence that has been found anywhere on Earth for the supposed primordial soup.
That's another point. Yeah, here's another one. Depolymerization is much faster than polymerization. The disintegration of these long molecules, amino acid strings of proteins and so on, they would break apart much faster than they could be put together.
Right.
It's another serious problem.
Yeah. Polymerization requires bifunctional molecules that can combine with two others, and is stopped by a small fraction of unifunctional molecules, the ones that can only combine with one, thus blocking one end of the growing chain. So Miller experiments produce 5 times more unifunctional molecules than bifunctional molecules. So if you're going with statistics here, his experiment didn't help that.
It wouldn't end up building chains of things.
Right.
It would just end there.
Sugars are destroyed quickly after the reaction, called formose, which is supposed to have formed them. Also, the alkaline conditions needed to form sugars are incompatible with acid conditions required to form polypeptides with condensing agents. Another challenge.
Another problem. Here's another one. Not all the necessary building blocks are formed. Ribose and cytosine are hard to form and are very unstable. Those things wouldn't have formed in these primitive experiments.
Right. So these long time periods don't help the evolutionary theory if biochemicals are destroyed faster than they're formed, right? And not all of the necessary building blocks are formed. And life actually requires what they call left and right-handed amino acids. Sorry.
Yes.
Right. Right-handed sugars, left-handed amino acids. These what would you call it? Building blocks come in 2 forms. It's kind of like our hands, right?
So that they can work together. Yeah, like if we shake hands, right? We
right
both extend our right hands. It doesn't work if we have a right and a left.
If you extend your left and I extend my right, that's not
it doesn't work,
working.
Right? And it's the same type of thing.
Right. So life has only left-handed amino acids. But these experiments give basically a mixture of 50-50.
Right.
Right? So there's no known way to only have left or right-handedness happen without these functional machinery that life already has. So how did that get there?
Yeah. Now here's another one. Life requires catalysts which are specific for a single type of molecule. This requires specific amino acid sequences which have extremely low probabilities. And we mentioned the probabilities already earlier on. Prebiotic polymerization simulations reveal random sequences, not functional proteins or enzymes.
Right. And the origin of a coding system of proteins on DNA is a total
That's
enigma.
a huge problem.
As a matter of fact, we're going to cover that in question number 2, but briefly here. So the message that's encoded, this is totally unrelated to chemistry. It's as unrelated to chemistry as the ink on this paper is unrelated to the message of the words that's actually there.
Yeah.
There's no direct, so the whole origin of DNA is a huge challenge, and we're going to cover that more in question number 2.
That in itself, just by itself, is a major roadblock to evolution.
It's about the biggest silver bullet out there, I think, against the concept of...
And yet it's only a part of question number 1, which is one of 15 of the questions in this flyer.
Yeah.
Here's one more. The origin of machines requires design. And you've probably all heard of these machines. Back in the 90s, it was the bacterial flagellum, right? That was the big discovery, this motor with parts that all work together.
That's right.
And then we have kinesin, discovered more recently than that, little robots inside your cells that carry packages with legs and arms.
2 legs and arms.
And that kind of thing. So the origin of machines obviously requires design, not random energy. The Nobel Prize-winning Merrifield designed an automatic protein synthesizer. Each amino acid added to the polymer requires 90 steps. The amino acid sequence is determined by program. If a living cell is like a self-replicating Merrifield machine to generate these proteins that take 90 steps, and it's another huge problem for evolution.
Now, of course, atheists and evolutionists have responded to all of the questions. So here were some of them that came back about question number 1 itself.
Yes.
So these are supposed answers to this problem. So answer number 1 was, abiogenesis is not relevant to the discussion of evolution. It is a separate topic. This has been a very common claim, by the way. It's come in several times. Now,
over and over again, yeah.
Actually, if you go to the original question evolution program we did, where we covered
the general objections to the entire flyer.
We deal with this.
It's back to the definition of what evolution is, right?
Right.
We're not just talking about genetic changes in living things from generation to generation. We're talking about particles to people, molecules to
general theory of evolution.
The general theory of evolution.
Yeah, and we even had an evolutionist define that. So when we're talking about the fact there's no life, then there's first life, and then it turns into everything that's ever been, that's what we're defining as evolution. Yes. So, and it's interesting that this objection didn't really come up until really what one of our writers said was the fact that evolutionists don't have a good answer for this. So instead of trying to deal with the answer, what you're trying to say is, well, this has nothing to do with our theory. Well, let's face it, folks, if you're an atheist, you have to believe that at some point life came from non-life, because there's no God, there's no creator, so it had to happen naturally. That's got to be part of your belief system. That's got to be part of evolution. So it's at least part of atheistic evolutionists' argument.
It's somewhere in the grand picture of how we got here.
That's right. And here's another reason. I had an article on this on our website. A miracle by any other name would be called science. I think one of the reasons why this is such a sore spot, question number 1 for atheists in particular, is that atheists constantly mock Christians for believing in miracles and being anti-science and all this kind of stuff. Well, let's face it. The law of biogenesis is a scientific law on
life
par.
Begets life. Louis Pasteur.
That's right. It's on par with any of the scientific laws we know of. Now, guess what? To be an atheist, you believe that law was broken in the past.
Yes.
But you've got no proof of it. Which means it's not a law. Because if you break any scientific law once, it's no longer a law. But it's a law. So if you believe it happened in the past, but you have no evidence for it, that's called faith. Which isn't scientific. So guess what? Atheists believe in miracles, and they're not scientific, if you're going to believe that system. So it's unfair for them to criticize us. And
you're pointing out another inconsistency in the atheists.
Yes. And
hurling the argument at us that, well, we believe in miracles, therefore it's not scientific.
That's right.
Well, actually.
So anyway, another objection.
Okay, another supposed answer from the evolutionary community that came is, life, non-life isn't a dichotomy. Rather, there are many examples of proto-life, such as viruses and other things like that.
Right, right.
But again, these intriguing little sub-life type of things, whatever you want to call them,
Yep.
still need life in order to. They still need the workings of a cell in order to function
Right.
properly, in order to carry out
So-
what they're
So,
doing.
Yeah, so many people think that they're actually a breakdown from something that maybe was before, right? It could be, or
Makes
it could be
sense.
just something God designed that was actually useful in certain situations, but you couldn't have them working if there was no life, so you still haven't explained where life comes
Yeah,
from.
It's back to the old attempt to say, well, life in the past was simpler.
Yeah.
We don't know what it was like, but it was simpler. And then pointing to viruses and things like this,
Right.
viruses don't work by themselves.
If they don't have life, they don't work, so that you still haven't explained where life comes from. It's not a good...
It's a dodge.
Yeah. Answer number 3. Some experiments show that Earth's early atmosphere was optimal for life. Well, we just went through
already
several.
gone through that.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. I mean, what experiments would you want to talk about? For example, the Miller-Urey experiment itself. Time magazine in 1994, October issue, had an article talking about the Stanley Miller-Urey experiment. And just a couple of quotes here. This textbook picture of how life originated, so familiar to college students just a generation ago, is under serious attack. Well, we've given you the reasons why it's under serious attack. It was, says planetary scientist and White House fellow Christopher Chiba, a beautiful picture. Unfortunately, he adds, it's probably wrong.
Probably wrong.
But it's still in textbooks here and there.
Well, because one of the problems is and we've mentioned this already, there's so much evidence that there was oxygen. In geologists will tell you that the rocks that are very, very old have plenty of evidence that
Yep.
there was oxygen in the atmosphere. Oxygen oxidizes things. It tears things apart.
Right.
It reacts with things. It would react with any type of organic molecule, whatever you want to imagine, happen back there and destroy it.
Right.
So you can't have oxygen. But there was oxygen, according to the evolutionists themselves.
Right. So there's the answers to question number 1, and we'll be having the whole series, so you can go through each one of the videos, and you can visit creation.com for more information.